Order! I call Rachel Reeves to ask her urgent question. Rachel Reeves.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To ask the Minister for the Cabinet Office if he will make a statement on the progress of the negotiations on the UK's future relationship with the EU and preparations for the end of the transition period.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm grateful for this opportunity to update the House on the progress of our negotiations with the European Union. Intensive talks continue. In fact, the United Kingdom's negotiating team, led by Lord Frost, has been in talks with the EU almost every day since the 22nd of October and is working tirelessly to get a deal on our future relationship. Indeed, this opportunity also affords us in this place to show our collective resolve in getting a good deal and our expectations of what that needs to look like and what we will not accept. Whilst there has been some progress across many areas, familiar differences remain on the so-called level playing field, fisheries and governance. Of these, the level playing field issue is currently the most difficult. On Friday, after an intensive week of talks in London, the respective chief negotiators, Lord Frost and Michel Barnier, issued a joint statement. This outlined the conditions for an agreement had not been met and that talks should pause briefly to allow the Prime Minister and the Commission President to discuss the state of play on Saturday. Following their telephone call, the Prime Minister and President von der Leyen issued a joint statement. This welcomed progress, but noted that an agreement would not be feasible if the issues on the level playing field, fisheries and governance were not resolved. They agreed a further effort should be made by the UK and EU to assess whether the outstanding differences can be resolved and instructed chief negotiators to reconvene in Brussels. Mr Speaker, we are at a critical moment in the negotiations. Teams are negotiating as we speak, and the Prime Minister will call the Commission President later this afternoon to discuss progress again. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, is also in Brussels today, meeting the European Commission Vice President in their capacity as co-chairs of the UK-EU Joint Committee under the Withdrawal Agreement. We are all working to get a deal, but the only deal that is possible is one that is compatible with our sovereignty and takes back control of our laws, trade and waters. Yeah. While an agreement is preferable, we are prepared to leave on so-called Australian-style terms if we can't find compromises. As the Prime Minister has made clear, people and businesses must prepare for the changes that are coming on the 31st of December, most of which are related to our departure from the EU Single Market and Customs Union and not the outcome of these talks. Mr Speaker, we will continue to keep the House updated as we seek to secure a future relationship with our EU friends that respects our status as a sovereign equal and independent country.
Minister Rachel Reeves.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last year, the Prime Minister said that to leave with no deal would be a failure of statecraft. So this government must take responsibility for their failure if we are to leave without a deal. And Mr Speaker, we will hold the government to account, whatever they bring back, deal or no deal. With just 24 days to go until the end of the transition period, let me ask a few basic questions in terms of this government and our country's readiness. Trading on WTO terms would mean tariffs on lamb exports of 40%. So what is the latest assessment for how many farms would go to the wall in the event of no deal? Tariffs on car exports would be 10%. So what is the viability of our great automotive industry if there is no deal on rules of origin? The Office for Budget Responsibility said last week, and Mr Speaker, I'm surprised that the Chancellor didn't mention it at all in his spending review statement, that if we leave without a deal, GDP would fall by an additional 2% next year. Unemployment would rise by an additional 1%, and inflation up 1.5%. But Mr Speaker, these aren't just numbers. This is about British industries and people's jobs. But the detail does matter. So will the Minister admit to the House how many of the 50,000 customs agents that the government agreed are needed by the end of the year have actually been recruited? Today, the Honourable Member for Braintree claimed that the oven-ready deal had already been delivered. Well, if that's the case, it must have been sent to the wrong address, because the whole country is waiting for the comprehensive trade and security deal that was promised to the British people at the general election less than a year ago. And Mr. Speaker, you will remember that the former International Trade Secretary said that a trade deal with the EU would be the easiest trade deal in human history. So let me finish by asking the Minister, is that still the view of this government?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I have some sympathy with Her Majesty's opposition today, because although I have been involved with various aspects of these negotiations, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Joint Committee under the Withdrawal Agreement, I have not been in the room for these negotiations, and nor has any member of this House. And I can understand that we have so much invested in getting a good result for all the reasons the Honourable Lady sets out, and it must be like what it would have been like for an expectant father outside the delivery room waiting for news. And I can understand the tension and the frustration that many members must be feeling at this critical moment. We are all waiting for, we hope, good news. But we are not powerless in this. We are all active players and participants, and we should all be doing everything we can at this critical moment to ensure that our negotiating team are supported and that we get the best result for this country. That means that we provide the clarity and resolve in what we want from a deal and what we are not prepared to accept, that we show united support for our negotiating team, and I hope that all members of this House would join me in sending our resolve and good wishes to Lord Frost and his team as they continue to work on our behalf, and also providing the necessary focus to get these negotiations over the line, such as many members of this House did in ensuring that we did not extend the transition period. Sadly, the Right Honourable Lady and her colleagues opposite have failed to do any of those things in order to help us secure a good deal for this country. Fair enough if Labour do not have a position on Brexit, but they might like to get one in the next few days. We must show, all of us in this House, support and resolve to get the deal that the Honourable Lady articulates and that we all want for citizens and businesses, not just within the UK, but throughout the remainder of the EU. She asked, I'm turning to your questions. There weren't that many questions in the Honourable Lady's question. The tariff issues, they are published on gov.uk. I know that she has recently written to the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and he will reply to her in detail, as he always does. What I would say to her, having been involved with transition preparations, is that when we have got into some of the detail, site visits and so forth, helping ports, for example, put together their bids for the Port Infrastructure Fund, assumptions that have been made about what we will need are able to have been reduced. In my own local patch, for example, we were looking at having to have 10 freight gates. We now only need 3 because of greater clarity we've had about how things will work. So we will keep the Honourable Lady and the Right Honourable Lady, forgive me, and all members of this House updated on this front. But I can assure her that we are making every effort to secure a deal. That is our aim. That is what everyone, I think, in this House would want. But that deal must respect the United Kingdom's sovereignty and its integrity as a nation. We want to be able to control our own borders, set our own robust and principled subsidy control system, and we also want to be able to control our waters. Those things are not up for compromise. We will not compromise. And if the Right Honourable Lady and colleagues want to assist Lord Frost and his team in that, then that is the message that they should send them this afternoon in this place.
Sir Ian Duncan.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank my right honourable friend for the statement? Can I say to her that I, for one, absolutely have confidence in Lord Frost and the Prime Minister, who are basing their negotiations on a manifesto that won us a huge majority at the last election. The British public voted for a sovereign departure, so that is to say that we will be a sovereign nation. She's right, therefore. And does she not agree with me that although this is entitled a trade discussion or a trade deal, the truth is, at the end of the day, this is essentially what she said earlier on about sovereignty, to have control, continuing control of our laws, of our territorial waters, and, for that matter, also of our trade, are matters of sovereign control, not just trade. So would she give that message back to our negotiators and say they've got this side of the House completely behind them?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for his comments and for saving my breath in saying that again. But he is absolutely right. And I think that it has been a difficulty on the EU side to come to terms with the fact that we are a sovereign equal in these negotiations. We have made this point time and time again. I know many members on these benches have made that point many times. But that is the sticking point. And I hope that the EU negotiators and all member states have heard the right honourable gentleman's message very loudly and clearly.
Let's head up to Scotland with SNP spokesperson Pete Wishart. Pete Wishart.
And thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So here we are at the 59th minute of the 11th hour, and we are where I suppose we were always going to be. The easiest deal in history has become the biggest unconcluded disaster of modern times. The oven-ready deal was in fact a barely defrosted turkey. We still don't know if it's to be a low deal or a no deal. The chaos is due to commence in a few short weeks, and we still don't know the scale of the carnage that each sector will have to endure. What we do know, I suppose, is that we'll all be the fault of these Europeans. What we do know is that even if it's a low deal, it will cost every Scot £1,600 and Scotland's GDP will fall by 6.1%. What we do know, of course, is that Scotland rejected this whole miserable project. So will the Minister concede that these negotiations have been nothing other than a shambles, that they simply don't care about the repercussions of a no deal, that the views of Scotland simply don't matter? If this government doesn't care about the views of Scotland, why should Scotland endure this misery any longer?
I think the honourable gentleman has surpassed himself today. I have to say, as someone that has worked with Mike Russell and other colleagues very hard on ensuring that their views and ideas are taken up by the negotiating team, I can tell him that throughout the course of the negotiations, the position has evolved to take on board many aspects of what his colleagues have been asking for. For example, on participation in programmes to be one such example. The team changed their original position and have gone in to negotiate very hard on things that they have asked for. So I hope that if we have good news in the coming days, he will give the UK government the entire credit.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend ensure that the government points out to our European partners that under their own treaty there cannot be any kind of deliberate go slow or disruption of UK exports to the continent, whether or not we have a free trade agreement? Because under their own treaty, they are obliged to pursue free and fair trade with their neighbours, and they're also obliged under Article 8.1 to pursue good neighbourliness. And both the UK and the European Union have signed up to the Trade Facilitation Agreement at the WTO, which obliges us to make sure that trade flows and does not get blocked by people doing box-ticking exercises, which are basically unnecessary.
Yeah. Well, my right honourable friend makes an excellent point, and he is absolutely right. And I would also say that if they were to do such a thing, they would also be disadvantaging the businesses in their own member states too.
Committee Chair Hilary Benton.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. We all wish the negotiators well, for the reason, not least, that my right honourable friend pointed out earlier, the Office for Budget Responsibilities assessment that no agreement could reduce real GDP by a further 2% in 2020 one on top of the adverse consequences that will come from Brexit anyway.
Yep.
Does the Right Honourable Member agree with that assessment? And if so, can she explain to the House why, in the middle of the worst economic crisis for 300 years, the Prime Minister still appears to believe that no deal would be a good outcome, because British business certainly doesn't?
He will have no argument from me to say that that no deal is going to be better than getting a deal. But everyone is working to get a deal. That is our objective. It is why Lord Frost, as I speak, is there with his team trying to secure that. But I would just say to the Right Honourable Gentleman that delaying a decision, extending the negotiations, well, I think that is what he is driving at, is the facts are not going to change. We have all the information and the positions are as they are. It is only by continuing those negotiations and us continuing to put the pressure on for those negotiations to be concluded that we will, I hope, arrive at a deal.
Dr. Liam Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all want to see a deal, but the difficulties are not really about trade. Uniquely, we began these negotiations with the entire identity of regulations, of tariffs and of trade law, which is unprecedented in the history of trade negotiations and should have made it more straightforward. So does my right honourable friend agree that it's not really about trade, the difficulties, but EU politics? It's about ensuring that no country follows the United Kingdom in exercising their legal powers to leave the European Union and the desire of some in the EU to limit the competitive potential of post-Brexit Britain.
Well, I agree with my right honourable friend, and it is not just the issues that I've set out in the UK's position that should be focusing the minds of the EU's negotiating team and the Commission. It is also what is in the interests of their member states. And Britain's position, the United Kingdom's position, is that we want this outcome not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all member states and the businesses and citizens within them.
We now come to Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the Cabinet Office's leaked reasonable worst-case scenario document, in the event of a no-deal Brexit, the supply of medicines and medical devices could be reduced by up to 40%. So in the spirit of doing all we can the Minister advise which products might be affected and whether my constituents, and indeed the constituents of every member in this place, should start to stockpile these?
Well, as has been said at the dispatch box before, a reasonable worst-case scenario is not a prediction. It is the worst case that we need to prepare for and mitigate for. We thought it was right, as we do across many areas, including COVID, that we think through those consequences, that we put those documents in the public domain, and the reasonable worst-case scenario was a document that we did set out to publish and did publish. But I would also say to her that whether it is on food supplies or medicine or anything related to the COVID pandemic, we have put in place mitigations for all sorts of things that could happen and could go wrong. So we are not anticipating a disruption to those supplies, and the work that we've undertaken include stockpiling of certain goods, securing our own freight capacity and many other things.
John Hunt.
With regards to the fact that we are the first country in the world to have approved a vaccine for COVID-19, does my right honourable friend agree with me that we really benefited from the ability to act quickly, nimbly and dynamically? And one of the key benefits of Brexit is it will extend this ability across a number of different areas. For example, international trading relationships, social employment legislation and so on and so forth. And will my right honourable friend assure me that whatever happens come the 31st of December, as a country, we will have that ability, we will have that power to chart our own course and have a wonderful future going forward?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. I supported Brexit, I voted for it, and I think there are many positives and opportunities that will come from it, not least being able to increase our collaboration and cooperation with many countries around the world. I would say that in terms of the COVID pandemic, unless we eradicate COVID, unless we ensure that every nation has access to vaccines, unless we are ensuring that that all countries can benefit from the science, wherever its provenance was from, that we will not defeat this pandemic. We're an incredibly connected nation, and we need to do that. And I think that with the future that we have, we will be able to be a major player in ensuring that that happens.
Samuel Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, the government is doing the right thing in resisting any demand from the EU to take the power to impose penalties on the UK at some time in the future if Brussels deems that we have not kept pace with laws made outside the United Kingdom. Taking back control is the whole point of Brexit. But I would say to the Minister, in resisting the level playing field demands by the EU, she must also ensure that the EU's demand for Northern Ireland to be included in their level playing field has to be resisted, because if she doesn't do that, and if the government doesn't do that, then we haven't taken back control. We have surrendered part of the United Kingdom to EU demands.
Well, my right honourable friend makes very good points, which he has made many times over. The level playing field is, I think, the most difficult issue that is facing the negotiating teams at the moment, and I thank him for his comments, which will have been heard by the team today.
Rob Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if in simple terms my right honourable friend could confirm that the UK government will not sign up to any agreement which compromises our sovereignty, or any agreement which compromises our ability to reach new trade agreements with the many countries around the world that are very, very keen to do business with an independent Britain.
Well, I can give him those assurances. The Prime Minister has been very clear on this point, and it is something that the EU negotiating team will be fully appraised of.
Let's go to the member for Huddersfield, Barry Sherman. Barry Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. The Secretary of State might know that I am a member of the Future Relationship with Europe Committee, which will be abolished next week. But as a member of that committee, what I have witnessed is the sheer incompetence of the government's leadership. On Saturday, we had Small Business Saturday. A businesswoman said to me, we have suffered 1,000 cuts in this last year from COVID. Why would any government inflict this, another 1,000 cuts, by coming out of Europe on the wrong terms in the wrong way?
Well, I think what would be damaging for business is more prolonged uncertainty. Our businesses, as we've seen, especially over the last year, are incredibly resilient, and they can cope with all sorts of things. What they can't cope with is every eventuality, as opposed to any eventuality. We need to give them the certainty, and I hope that we will soon be able to inform them of the remaining issues that the negotiating teams are working on. That will provide them with 100% clarity about the situation that they are facing, and we will continue to support them get ready for that transition.
Mr. Speaker, we all wish the Prime Minister, Lord Frost, and the negotiating team every success in securing the deal with the EU. But should the trade talks fail, the government's reasonable worst-case scenario suggests that there might be significant issues with the flow of imported medicines in the first few months. Would my right honourable friend therefore reassure all our constituents that, come what may, there will be no impediment to the imported COVID-19 vaccines and other crucial medicines, if need be, in the worst-case scenario, deploying military transport?
I can give him and his constituents those assurances. This is an incredibly serious matter. The supply of medicines and medical devices, even without the pandemic, has always been a priority right back to last year and the potential no-deal scenario planning that went on. I mean, huge efforts, and his question affords me the opportunity to pay tribute to the civil servants, the military personnel, the local resilience forums, and many other people who have been planning, who have been conducting exercises, and of course all of those people who have been working on our on the winter planning assumptions around that. So I can give him those assurances that we take this very seriously indeed.
Ben Bradshaw. But Mr. Speaker, those assurances have been flatly contradicted just last week by the head of the UK's pharmaceutical industry, Richard Talbot, who said that border delays and, crucially, the absence of mutual recognition standards in the event of no deal will disrupt the supply of vital medicines to this country, including vaccines. So why should we believe government ministers rather than the man who heads our multi-billion-pound medicines industry and knows what he's talking about?
So I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question. There are many potential problems, but those problems have been methodically thought through. As I say, they range from administrative issues that he refers to, right through to freight transport issues, including us securing backup plans if transport is not available, or commercial transport is not available, or we have issues of pinch points on those key transit routes. In addition to that, and in addition to the phased approach to the border that is being taken next year, we have obviously as well, in the first few weeks, put additional measures in place to really try and ensure that there are no delays and no snarl-ups on those key freight routes.
Robert Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I refer to my entry in the Register of Interests. My right honourable friend is right, of course, to observe that it is in everybody's interest that there should be a deal, and that uncertainty is damaging for everyone. Will she bear in mind that is particularly acute for the people of Her Majesty's Territory of Gibraltar? And will she ensure that they, above all, for whom we have responsibility in these negotiations, are not allowed to become collateral damage in these matters? Will she also undertake to ensure that the Government of Gibraltar are kept fully informed of all developments and every assistance given to ensure that whatever the outcome, there is a smooth flowing land frontier and delivery of essential services for Gibraltar?
Well, I agree with all the points that my right honourable friend has made, and I can assure him that from my involvement in the negotiations and keeping our partners informed, that all of those issues with regard to Gibraltar are absolutely at the heart of our negotiating position, and I thank him for having raised it on the floor of the House today.
We go over to Wales with Howell Williams. Howell Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the worst case of no deal, tariffs on food imports from the EU would on average be over 20%, but on beef mince 48%, cheddar cheese 57%, oranges 12%. The list, Mr. Speaker, goes on and on. But over the weekend, the Agriculture Secretary said that the impact of tariffs would be modest. Will she concede that this is not true for the third of children in Wales who live in poverty, or from poor children all across the UK?
Well, as I said earlier, information about tariffs has been published on gov.uk, but what I would say to him is that we are negotiating to ensure that we can get a deal. And I can understand the honourable gentleman's concerns, but our efforts are to secure that deal. And I hope that he would join us in that effort and send a clear message today to the EU negotiating team that it's not just in the interests of his constituents, but actually in the interests of all citizens across the EU too.
Robin Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's no doubt that it is in the best interest of all parties to secure a deal. However, I know that for many residents in Aberconwy who voted to leave, sovereignty was a key driver in that. It's been cited throughout these negotiations as a red line. So would my right honourable friend reassure all our constituents that, come what may, deal or no deal, after we leave these negotiations, we will do so with our sovereignty intact?
I can give him those assurances. The Prime Minister has been very clear on this point, and the EU negotiating team will recognise that it is a point from which we will not move.
17 withdrawn, so Tobias Howard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend knows more than most how increasingly unstable our complex world is becoming. Would she agree that the threats that we face, both state and non-state actors, don't actually recognise international borders or membership of political unions, and no decision taken this week should diminish our collective security responsibility?
Well, I agree with my right honourable friend, absolutely, and it is one of the things that I have never accepted about what has been said about the EU's negotiating position. I do not believe that member states would tolerate their own citizens being put in greater harm. I think that the security and defence cooperation that we have between member states and ourselves is highly valued and I think would be recognised by all member states in that respect.
Let's head down to Brighton Pavilion with Caroline Lucas. Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister see the irony of UK negotiators trying to persuade our EU counterparts of our good faith when it comes to compliance with the rules of any new trade deal, at exactly the time that the Prime Minister is today asking Parliament to vote to break international law by ripping up rules that were agreed barely a year ago? And can she tell us why the government has apparently yet to agree to non-regression over current standards when ministers have repeatedly assured us that they intend to maintain and even enhance our own environmental standards?
Well, I think that the trust in which the United Kingdom is renowned is deep, and I think that it is very well understood that the moves that the government has taken with regard to the UKIM bill have had to be taken as an insurance policy to preserve the integrity of our country. And the Prime Minister and my honourable friend, the Minister for the Constitution, have been very clear, as has the Secretary of State for Justice, as to why we are taking this particular course of action. And I still think that the United Kingdom is held in very high esteem in that respect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A large number of colleagues today have already mentioned the importance of parliamentary sovereignty, which we recognise as one of the most important cornerstones of our democracy. With people across the country overwhelmingly voting to get Brexit done, can my right honourable friend assure Bishop Auckland residents and the House that any deal we sign will categorically not undermine our sovereignty, our ability to set our own border policy, but also our ability to strike free trade deals with our global friends around the world?
Quite right, Mr. Speaker. We have, as a nation, gone through a roller coaster over the last few years, and the British people have been absolutely resolved, demonstrated at the last general election, that we are going to get this done, and I think it would be a very difficult discussion to be having with our constituents if we had gone through that roller coaster for no upside. We have to secure these freedoms. We are a sovereign nation, and that is the future we must all look forward to.
Stephen Farry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like the rest of the UK, Northern Ireland badly needs to see a deal, not least because no deal means that the prospect of some tariffs being levied down the Irish Sea interface. But regardless of a deal or no deal, can the Minister give this House an assurance that the Government will work in good faith with the EU over the coming days to conclude the discussions in the Joint Committee around the implementation of the protocol, and that will also include consideration of a grace or adjustment period for Northern Ireland businesses because they simply don't have the time any longer to prepare for the 1st of January?
Yes, I can give him those assurances, and I think that although we are talking about issues which are extremely difficult, particularly the three issues that I alluded to earlier on, the talks and negotiations are constructive and they are continuing apace, and I hope that we will have good news in the coming days.
John Gideon.
Mr. Speaker, in light of the opposition's recent refusal to make any decision as their constituents send them to this place to make, in support or opposition of the tier restrictions, What assessment has my right honourable friend made of demands from some parts of this House for the government to reach any deal on the European Union, with the European Union, while simultaneously considering voting against or not at all if any such a deal is brought before this House?
Great.
Well, I agree with my honourable friend that it only makes sense to keep your powder dry if you're prepared to accept no deal. But the position of the opposition is one for them. I just hope they get one in the next few days.
Claire Anderson.
Mr. Speaker, this is a shambles. I held a meeting with local businesses in my constituency about the impact of this ongoing uncertainty all year. One owner of a logistics company said to me that the damage has been done. She waited throughout November for the deal. It didn't come, and her business has now been killed. Her staff have lost their jobs. Will the Minister apologise to business owners like my constituents for this utter mess?
Well, I'm sorry to hear about the plight of the honourable lady's constituent, and as I have reiterated many times before, I am available every day on COVID, on Brexit issues. If people want to talk, I'm available at 10 a.m. Every single day, and have been for weeks. And I'm not making a political point. I'm saying to all members, if businesses are in difficulty for whatever reason, please do get in touch. But I would say to the honourable lady, we would have liked this resolved earlier, but we are not prepared to compromise on matters which are of immense importance to many of her constituents. We will not compromise on that, but we are working incredibly hard to resolve these remaining issues. And I hope that in short order we will be able to provide her constituents and everyone else with the certainty that they need.
Let's head to Wellingborough with Peter Bone. Peter Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the Prime Minister has done a fantastic job over Brexit. He's taken the United Kingdom out of the European Union, and I'm absolutely confident he will only bring back a deal to this House if it takes back control of our laws, borders and trade. In fact, I'd bet my house on it that he will not betray those principles. But can I ask the excellent Minister why the negotiations are still continuing? The EU said the absolute deadline for these negotiations was the 31st of October. And here we are on the 7th of December. Is the Minister hinting to us from her answer to the previous question that tonight we will get a decision one way, a deal or a no deal?
I'm not hinting at that, Mr. Speaker, although that would be jolly nice. In my opening answer in response to the question, I outlined what I'm expecting to happen this afternoon in terms of the Prime Minister speaking to the Commission President. So I'm not raising that hope, but these negotiations are continuing because a deal is still possible, and we will continue to negotiate until that ceases to be the case.
Neil Coyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Brexit has already cost our country billions. We have seen investment slump in crucial sectors, a rise in unemployment, and some businesses leave our shores before we even reach the artificial self-imposed deadline at the end of this year. So how many more jobs will be lost? How much more economic damage will we suffer? And what further undermining of our international influence and national security will it take before those who peddled the false promises of 2016 admit they are simply undeliverable in these negotiations or anywhere else?
Well, I would ask the honourable gentleman to reflect why he thinks that our nation, collectively together, voted to leave the EU. And I'm sure it was a range of issues, some economic, they may not have wanted to be tied to the Eurozone, many other reasons, but for many it was about sovereignty and being able to shape our own future. But the policies that we are carrying out and doing our best to secure a deal for are what we have a mandate to do from the British people. We put the question to them, they gave us their response, and it is incumbent on all of us in this place to act on their wishes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is under huge pressure this week to secure a deal, any deal. But does my right honourable friend agree with me that the long-term economic and political consequences of a bad deal, one that keeps the UK in the regulatory orbit of the EU, not an independent sovereign state, would be far worse than any temporary short-term consequences that might flow from no deal?
I agree with my honourable friend. There has to be a point to all of the upheaval that we have been through together as a nation over the last few years, and there are many positives that we can look forward to with those newfound freedoms and being able to make the right choices for this country. And as I say, again, it is not just about the interests of the United Kingdom. I think that the negotiating position of the UK is also of benefit to the remainder of the EU.
Beck Cooper.
Mr. Speaker, the National Police Chiefs Council has said that losing access to criminal information if there is no negotiated agreement would have a major impact for counter-terrorism and serious organised crime. We obviously all hope that a full agreement is imminent, but if agreement is not reached on fish or a level playing field, has the government drawn up proposals for a fallback security agreement? And does she agree that if the UK and EU negotiators fail to secure arrangements that protect our citizens' security, that would be highly irresponsible of both?
Well, I think the Right Honourable Lady makes an excellent point, and as I said, it is one reason why I think a deal is in everyone's interest, but also why I always thought that nations would not compromise on the security of their citizens. It is the responsibility of the government on every aspect, whether it is the issues the Right Honourable Lady raises or about freight transport issues, whatever, to have thought through the consequences and have prepared for those consequences. And that is the case on all issues, including the ones that she raises.
Sean Bailey.
Mr. Speaker, the 70% of my constituents who voted to realise this country's potential 4 years ago, they want the negotiating team to succeed in obtaining a deal. But can I ask my right honourable friend, when it comes to particularly rules of origin, I represent communities in Wednesbury, Albury and Tipton that are very heavily based on manufacturing. Can she reassure me that the negotiating team continue to negotiate robustly on this point and that they will stand up for manufacturing businesses like mine in Wednesbury, Albury and Tipton?
I can give him those assurances. The team have done a tremendous job, and I know that the detail that they have gone into on each sector on this. But it is very helpful him reiterating the importance of those matters to his constituents this afternoon.
Let's head up to Scotland with Dr. Philippa Whitford. Dr. Whitford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even if there's a deal at this 11th hour, it will be very thin, inflicting customs costs and delays on sectors that are already struggling to survive COVID. The Minister's called on businesses to get ready. The government's own IT systems aren't ready. Indeed, the fish export service will only go live just 2 days before the end of transition. Does the fact this government is having to plan military flights to bring in medical supplies, including the vaccine, not make them pause for thought before such an act of self-harm?
Well, I think it is right that we prepare for every possible contingency. And even if, I mean, there are all sorts of things that we have not mentioned this afternoon that are part of government's in-tray, all sorts of contingencies that we have to think about. I, for example, in the Cabinet Office look after cyber issues. There are many things that we have to think about, many things that we can have to prepare for. And I think it is the right thing to do, particularly on medicine and medical devices, that we ensure we have every contingency in place. But I would also point out to her that the border operating model, many things that businesses will need to do to get ready are not contingent on the final negotiations going on. We have invested heavily in support services for traders, for businesses, for citizens as well, and I think it has been right to do so. Again, if colleagues have issues with their constituents or businesses, they can please talk to me and I will do my best to get an official to talk to their business, put them in touch with the many webinars that are going on to help support businesses and citizens make this transition.
Let's head up to Mansfield with Ben Bradley. Ben Bradley.
I, for one, am delighted, Mr. Speaker, that we're finally going to reach a Brexit conclusion on December 31st. I'm pleased to hear the continued commitment from my right honourable friend to the red lines that have been set, and I know many of my constituents will appreciate the stance taken by Lord Frost and the negotiating team. But will my right honourable friend also recommit that regardless of the outcome of trade talks, the government will ensure that the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is realised and that it finds its way to those places across the UK that most need it?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I do hope that next year we will be able to, as we hopefully recover from the COVID pandemic, we make progress on the phased approach to the border and all the other things that we've been working so hard to put in place, that we will really be able to turn to how we really get economic growth happening across the whole of the United Kingdom and ensure that communities such as the one that he represents get the investment that they need and the opportunities that they deserve.
Let's head up to Scotland with Martin Day. Martin Day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Scottish Government modelling of a basic trade agreement along the types that the Government is still trying and it would appear failing to negotiate finds that Scottish GDP is estimated to be 6.1% lower by 2030 compared to continued EU membership. And that equates to each person in Scotland an equivalent cost of around £1,600. And this now looks like the best case scenario. What assessments have the Government made about the combined impact of Brexit on top of the already severe impact on business and those about to lose their jobs due to the COVID crisis?
Well, what we need to be focusing on is how do we ensure that in every part of the UK we can get the economic growth that we need, we can get the infrastructure investment that we need, and there will be opportunities that come from some of the investments that are being made over the transition period. And I would ask the honourable gentleman to turn his energy and focus onto those issues. We have left the EU. We will hopefully have news of a deal, but certainly we will have certainty for all of our businesses and constituents in the coming days. And we need to turn and look to the future and how we can help realise our constituents' ambitions, and I would encourage him to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The 17.4 million people who gave such a clear instruction some 4.5 years ago will look on it with bemusement that there are still voices seeking to undermine that democratic mandate. And so will my right honourable friend agree with me that in order to respect that democratic mandate, that despite all of the negativity and the negative voices undermining our excellent trade negotiators, that this must be a verdict that is a binary one. Either we will be sovereign or we will not.
There is no question that we will be sovereign. This is not an issue that we are prepared to compromise on. But I will, as he has mentioned, leave voters stick up for Remain voters, because I've said this before, but I will say it again. The greatest act of patriotism in the last few years was shown by them in accepting the democratic result of the referendum. I think that everyone in this country wants us to be successful and make use of the opportunities that will be there next year as we come out of this ghastly pandemic. And I hope that all members will be working positively in the interests of all their constituents to do that.
I confess I find all of this very depressing, and partly because, if I understand the DEFRA Secretary correctly, the anticipation is that if there is no deal, the government will be paying Welsh farmers to burn Welsh lamb carcasses next spring when they can't sell them in Europe. And if I understand all the police forces in the UK and the National Crime Agency correctly, if there's no deal, they won't be able to have the same access to EU databases to be able to track down criminals and send them to prison. But even more worrying than that for me is that historically, this House and this country has always been good at doing deals. Frankly, we've always been the country that has compromised. We've always known how to get the signature on the paper, but every time another member stands up on the other side and demands more intransigence from the government, the more likelihood there is that there's going to be no deal, and that will be a catastrophe for all of us.
Well, I'd say two things to the right honourable gentleman. I think that there are many things that we can point to. In fact, I think the Prime Minister has tabled a statement this afternoon, I think it was tabled before I came into the chamber, which points to things that he has offered the President of the Commission in way of moving this forward with regard to the UKIM bill. We have at many stages compromised, sought to find ways to encourage the EU negotiating team forward. So I do reject, with all due respect, the right honourable gentleman's description of the way that the Prime Minister and the negotiating team have operated. They've operated in good faith and have compromised on many areas. But there are some areas that we will not compromise on because it is not in the interest or the integrity of the United Kingdom to do so. And finally, I would just point out to him that I think that the plan that the DEFRA Secretary set out at the start of the weekend just gone about the opportunities that exist for UK farmers and the opportunities that we have to look after the environment, to actually have scientists at DEFRA as opposed to lawyers, and many other things. They are hugely beneficial to UK farming and hugely beneficial to the environment, and I would encourage him to look at them.
Davis.
Speaker, can I convey my full support to Lord Frost and the Prime Minister for their stance during these negotiations? I genuinely don't think they've put a foot wrong throughout this entire process. Like the Minister, I want to see a comprehensive free trade deal with the EU, but certainly not any deal, and definitely not a deal which leaves us shackled to EU rules and regulations in perpetuity. So can I urge the government to stand firm in these negotiations to make sure that we deliver on the Brexit that so many people voted for and that so many of us campaigned for so many years?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for his comments and absolutely can give him those assurances. His question also affords me the opportunity not just to pay tribute to the negotiating team and Whitehall civil servants, but also the very many individuals and politicians and civil servants in the devolved administrations, but also the Crown dependencies and elsewhere too, who have worked incredibly hard to get us thus far. And it is because of all those efforts that I want to ensure that we do get this over the line. And all the encouragement that the honourable gentleman and others can give in that respect is gratefully received.
We now go to Catherine McKinnell.
The North East region has consistently exported more than it imports, and the government promised the people of the North East an oven-ready deal with no tariffs, fees, charges, quantitative restrictions that would safeguard workers' rights, consumer and environmental protections, and keep people safe through a comprehensive security agreement. So with the negotiations now going late in the day and these promises looking increasingly overcooked, what is the government doing to ensure that businesses and individuals in the North East are able to properly prepare for and manage these changes to come?
Well, the Honourable Lady raises a very important point. Obviously, I will reiterate again, we are working to get a deal, and we will continue to negotiate until that becomes an impossibility, but I am hopeful that we will get a deal. We have invested a huge amount in ensuring that businesses are ready. Most of the things that businesses and citizens will need to do are already known. They're not contingent on the final negotiations. Again, I stand ready to assist if there are particular issues that her constituents or businesses have, but there is an enormous amount of support, not just information, but also webinars, dialogue with experts and officials to ensure that people have all the information that they have. And of course, there is the very substantial campaign that has been running now for many weeks to ensure people are fully informed about what they need to do before the end of the year.
We now go to Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm sure that my right honourable friend will join me in congratulating the International Trade Department on the new trade deals with major markets such as Japan, Kenya and Canada, with many more to come. Will she confirm that nothing will be done in our negotiations with our friends from the European Union which will compromise our ability to do new trade deals around the world?
Can give him those assurances. It is one of the main motivating factors as to why people wanted to leave the EU. Many other reasons about the EU's trade policies and protectionism and the impact that has particularly on developing nations. I will happily join his praise of that department. They have had a huge amount of work to do in forging new trading relationships, but also, of course, rolling over existing arrangements and improving on those for many, many nations, which quite often doesn't make the press, but it is a substantial amount of work and they've done an excellent job.
Mick Whitley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a tsunami of job losses in the British manufacturing sector. Thousands more will be lost if tariffs are slapped on British goods. Can I ask the Minister, what steps is this government taking to help British manufacturers make the critically important investment needed to save jobs and skills and compete internationally in the event of a no-deal Brexit?
Well, I would reiterate again that we are working to get a deal, and that is one thing that we are. The issues he raises are at the forefront of our mind as we do that. But the Department for Business has done a huge amount. It has its sector committees and structures, and is working hand in glove with the sector, listening to what their needs are, and that is informing obviously policies that are being produced from the Treasury and elsewhere. As we come into a new year and a new start, we want to ensure that exactly those types of businesses, particularly businesses that have been eroded in certain parts of the country, have what they need to have a renaissance, and that will be our focus in the new year.
Hughes.
Madam Deputy Speaker, is my right honourable friend fully aware of the strength of solid support for the government's negotiating position from these benches? Does she agree with me that a deal can only be done with all the necessary compromises on both sides that will entail if it starts from a point of fundamental acceptance of the United Kingdom as a sovereign, independent third country?
Well, I agree entirely with what my honourable friend has said, and I thank him for his support and the support of all members in this House who are getting behind the negotiating team and helping send that clear message to the EU negotiating team this afternoon. What I would also say is it is not just on these benches, but in our constituencies where there is huge support. Whichever way people voted in the referendum, they know that this is the way forward. They want to get these final issues resolved swiftly so that we can all get on with it in the new year.
39 withdrawn, so Peter Alders.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Reef project sets out an exciting vision for the renaissance of the East Anglian fishing industry. Two preconditions for achieving this are the certainty that significantly more fish will be available to land in ports such as Lowestoft, and secondly, that there is a framework for promoting investment in ports and the processing sector. Can my right honourable friend confirm that these two requirements are not being compromised in the negotiations that are taking place?
I can give him those assurances. I mean, this is clearly fish is one of the sticking points, and the negotiating team are obviously working very hard. But it's a sticking point because we will not compromise on these issues. And I have to say, as in a former life as Coastal Communities Minister, and having visited his constituency and discussed the potential that is there for the renaissance of that industry, I think that is a prize worth holding out for.
Alan Brown.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government spent goodness knows how much money in radio adverts and newspaper adverts telling businesses to be ready for January the 1st. I've got a business in my constituency, a nursery that imports plants from Europe, and they want to be ready to continue importing. But the C1800 forms for handling freight imports isn't available on the government website. They don't know what inspection arrangements will be. Is there any inspection agents for the plants? Where will inspections take place? Nobody knows what the conditions in road haulage is going to be for outgoing goods. So can she tell me what I can tell my constituent how his business continue to trade successfully in January 1st? Because it's not apparent from anything I've seen.
I'm sure that the honourable gentleman has done his homework and done his best to help his constituent. I don't know whether he has used the toolkit that was sent to his casework team on the 26th, I think, of November. Okay. Well, it will give that will give contact details for him to get in touch with officials that are standing ready to talk to businesses, to give them the bespoke advice that many of them will need. If he wishes to pass the details of the company to me after this, I will go and ensure that the relevant official can speak to them. And I mean this very genuinely. I'm not trying to get one over on the right honourable gentleman. We are making every effort to ensure that all members of the House have the information that they need if people need further help than what is just on gov.uk and the webinars and so forth that are going on. We want to ensure every business is supported in these efforts, and if he passes me the details, I'll ensure his constituent is.
Now go to Nigel Mills.
Thank you. What does the Right Honourable Lady say to those on both sides who seem to believe that now is not the best time to make a deal, that perhaps it will be better next year to come back and a better deal could be done? Surely that is ridiculous, and this is by far the best time for a deal. It's pretty much now or a long time in the future.
I'm tempted to say no, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I think the honourable gentleman makes a very good point. We know that delaying negotiations, extending the period of negotiations, that is not a possibility now, but also it's the wrong thing to do. We need the focus and resolve for both parties to come together and agree a deal. It's very clear what that needs to look like from our point of view, but the negotiations are still continuing, and I remain optimistic.
Now go to Emma Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Despite the recently signed Fisheries Framework Agreement with Norway, there is currently no legal basis for UK fisheries distant water vessels to fish cod in the Norwegian economic zone from the end of this year, as it has been doing for decades. In the event of a no-deal Brexit, what is the government doing to ensure continued access to these waters?
Well, our position is exactly in line with existing precedent of the EU's current fisheries agreement with Norway. We now have a seat at the forums that decide these matters. We have our UK seat back. On the specifics, I will ask the DEFRA Minister to write to her. And if she wishes to give me any further details about a particular company that is having difficulties, I'll connect them with the relevant official.
Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Beaconsfield businesses are bracing and embracing the end of Brexit and the transition period, but could my right honourable friend provide further assurances of the plans and the support that is in place for supporting businesses, particularly small businesses, in Beaconsfield?
Well, as I stated, all members have information, special information that's been put together to help signpost any inquiries that come into their offices. But clearly we have put in place a huge amount of support for each sector. There is the trader support service that has been stood up. There is work going on in the relevant departments for each individual sector. The officials have done a tremendous job and spoken to tens of thousands of businesses across the UK through webinars and in some cases on a one-to-one basis to talk through their issues. As I say, the bulk of things that businesses need to do, we know about. And I would also give a nod to the Central Office of Information, who have been running the campaign that ministers have colleagues have spoken about this afternoon, which has had great effect in raising awareness and ensuring that people are ready by the end of the year.
We now go to Barbara Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Orchestras in the UK are being hit by a double whammy of the COVID pandemic and uncertainty around what they need to do to perform on tour after December 31st. The Northern Ireland Protocol means that goods moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland will require customs declarations. Orchestras who work between Great Britain and Northern Ireland have to transport their instruments to perform there. Can the Minister confirm whether an orchestra in this position will require carnets for their instruments after January the 1st? Because orchestras haven't been able to find out, despite the government promising to give the information and support needed for the end of the transition period.
I suspect there is more to it than all the information I heard in the question there, because I don't think they should require, if I've understood the journey correctly, any paperwork of that sort. But again, if the Honourable Lady would like to give me the details of that case, I will get her a swift answer on that.
Mark Jenkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I remain confident in the ability of Lord Frost and his negotiating team to strike a deal over the next few days. But it is right that my right honourable friend and Lord Frost's team stand firm on reclaiming our sovereignty. Can she confirm to me and the people of Workington who stand squarely behind her and Lord Frost that we'll leave the transition period on the 1st of January 2021 on Australian terms if necessary?
As I said, we will work until there is no hope left of getting a deal. And I too have great confidence that he has kindly expressed in Lord Frost and the very great team that are supporting him. But it is very clear, if we cannot resolve these final issues, in particular the three that I mentioned in my opening remarks, then we will not be able to conclude that deal. We must ensure that our sovereignty is not up for grabs. We have been crystal clear from the get-go on that, and I think that that is what the people of the United Kingdom expect.
Jim Shannon.
Can I thank the Minister for her answers to the UQ, and also I wish the negotiating team all the best for the next few hours and perhaps maybe days. I've seen many concerning reports regarding deals done in reference to our seas, and I ask for a clear and unequivocal assurance from the Minister on behalf of the fishing sector in Portavogie and my constituency that there will be no surrender of our seas and our rights to European fisheries, and that we will bring the fishing industry and processors back home as was promised by our government in the past.
I can give him those assurances. Sometimes people say that we shouldn't be holding out on these issues, that it's a small contributor to the economy, or that it's got some kind of talismanic status because of what went before many years ago when we first went into the EEC. It is not because of those things. This is an incredibly important part of the economy, but also our communities and our identity as the United Kingdom. And we will not compromise on that. We are a sovereign nation. These are our waters. We have plans for a resurgence of these industries, and he has my assurances that the Prime Minister will not compromise.
Anderson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, exactly a year ago today, I was banging on doors in Ashfield telling people we were going to get Brexit done, and we're getting Brexit done. But there's been some speculation over the past few days regarding Brexit negotiations, which has led to a number of Ashfield residents contacting me with their concerns. Could my right honourable friend please assure the residents of Ashfield and Eastwood that we will regain control over our borders, laws and fisheries, and our economic and political independence will be restored?
Well, I hope, Madam Deputy Speaker, that if the EU negotiating team has not heard the resolve of members on these benches this afternoon, they will have heard the resolve of the honourable gentleman's constituents. It is absolutely right that this has been confirmed not just in a referendum but also in a general election, giving a very clear mandate about what the British people expect us to deliver on. And as we enter the final stages of these negotiations, I hope that is well understood by the other negotiating team. And the sooner they come to terms with that and the Prime Minister's resolve, the sooner we will be able to get a deal.
49 withdrawn, so final question, Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, can I first of all congratulate my right honourable friend for the work she has done in getting the country ready for the new regulations that are coming at the end of this month. I must admit that it seems a bit like the Millennium Bug when everybody thought it was going to be a disaster, but everybody did the prep work and got there in the end. But could I ask my right honourable friend what plan she has in place for other things that may happen between now and the 31st of December that businesses will need to be ready for? What action plan she got? Because the work she's done so far has been outstanding, and I wouldn't want it to stumble at the last hurdle.
I thank my honourable friend for his very kind words. It would be remiss of me not to mention in his absence today the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, who has done an incredible job with chairing, in addition to his work on the COVID pandemic, but chairing EXO every single day, I think, since I've been in this post. I'm the default chair, but I've only chaired it on a few occasions. He has done that. He has done a huge amount of work in building rapport with his oppo on the Joint Committee on the Withdrawal Agreement, and I think deserves huge credit for the immense efforts that he has taken both on to the transition but also on ensuring that the Withdrawal Agreement Joint Committee and its specialised committees are churning through the work that they need to do, not just for UK citizens but for citizens in the rest of the EU. So I shall pass on, I shall take his praise and pass it on to the Chancellor of Duchy of Lancaster. As I said, there will be very few things that are outstanding that businesses will need to be appraised of that are contingent on the final negotiations. We have put together comprehensive information for all members in this House, and they will find that in their inboxes. We will also conduct webinars with your caseworkers if there is a demand for that. We have a programme already set up to do that. And I would also put on record the incredible work of the Border Delivery Group and civil servants in all departments who have ensured not just that we are ready for the transition and whatever comes to pass, but also have been working to secure these negotiations. And I thank all members for putting on record in the Chamber today our resolve and our will to get a deal, but not a deal at any price.
Thank you. We'll now have a 3-minute suspension to allow for safe exit and entry of honourable and right honourable members.